And thank you so much for having Michael and I here this morning. And Clark, thank you so much, and the entire staff here. I think you all know what a wonderful organization this is. You walk in here and it's comfortable, it's homey, and it's caring and it's loving. And so it's just a vital thing. And thank you, Clark, for what you do for the community and everything that you do. My name is Glenn Witzenburg, and I think sometimes if you know a little bit about someone, it kind of helps you to know where they're coming from and where they're going. I'm a Midwestern gentleman. I've been in funeral. I was born and raised in Iowa, and I became a funeral director, first in my family to become a funeral director. I went to Nebraska and began practice there. I worked there for 35 years in small funeral homes in towns of about 4,000 to 5,000 people, serving families. And I've never been sorry that I became a funeral director. I just have such a feeling of love and compassion, helping people, and that's who I am. And so we raised our family there, 5 children, retired, moved to Florida. I did not like being retired. I'm a funeral director. That's who I am. That's what I am. I'm not a professional golfer. I'm not a good tennis player. So I came here, and so I started working part-time at a corporate funeral home here. And again, love serving families. But I didn't like the corporate atmosphere. I didn't like what was going on because the priorities are just a little different, okay? And so I met Michael Whyte, and he's a funeral director from Boston. He can tell you about himself. And so we developed an idea for funeral service, which we think is totally unique. It's totally different. It gives a high value to funeral service, high value to serving families, but it's very affordable. So at the present time, I'd like to introduce my best friend and my co-founder of Legacy Options, Michael Whyte.
Well, my name is Michael Whyte. I'm Glenn's partner, and I am from Boston, okay? And Glenn will translate for me if we have any issues around understanding me. But I try to avoid those kinds of words that Bostonians have a difficult time with, like yard and car and things of that nature, but we'll avoid those. My family moved down to Florida, Southeast Florida, back in the 50s. And I went to junior high and high school over on the East Coast in Hollywood, Florida. And after graduating from high school, I started my internship at a local family funeral home in Miami Beach. And at that time, I realized I really wanted to pursue a career in funeral service. However, at that time, Florida had no funeral service schools, and there was only about 6 in the country. So I returned to Boston with my wife and family, and I attended college in Boston and graduated in 1968 and became a licensed board certified embalmer in 1971 and a funeral director in 1972. And like Glenn, I stayed with my career in the Boston area for about 35 years, at which time I retired and came to Florida. And like Glenn as well, retirement and I really didn't make it out too well. So I started a career, and for the most part, there are not too many family-run funeral homes. There's a lot of family-run funeral homes that were started here in Naples or Collier County and have been over the years acquired by large corporations. And when I was recruited by a large corporation to serve in funeral service, I had made it aware to them that I had never worked in the corporate environment in funeral service, and I didn't know how it would work. And they said, please try it. And I did. And I stayed there for 7 years. And I became a general manager for 3 locations, including a cemetery. And that's when I met Glenn Witzenburg. At the end of 7 years, I decided that I wanted to try something different, kind of a new approach to funeral service. One that I felt that everybody was really ready for. And I approached Glenn with this, my idea of what I wanted to do, and Glenn added to that And after about a year and a half, the two of us came up with a concept in funeral service to serve families in kind of a different environment. And both of us agreed that there was nothing meaningful about a funeral home. Nothing meaningful about chapel A, B, or C. And that there was much more meaningful places to hold a service, a celebration of life, than a funeral facility. And in packets that we have for each one of you, you'll see a picture of some of the venues that we actually use. One of which is a very favorite, is a nonprofit park right next to the Naples Community Hospital called the Garden of Hope and Courage. It's absolutely beautiful. It is serene. It is comforting. It has everything that really a funeral home does not have. It doesn't have that at all.
Show and tell, painted by one of our wonderful caregivers, the Garden of Hope.
This is the Garden of Hope and Courage. It's just absolutely beautiful. And this supports our concept. Other venues that we use are botanical gardens, which is also beautiful. We also use local churches, fellowship halls, and Sudkin Park, any kind of facility that is really nonprofit. So we get an understanding from what a family would like, what they would really like in remembering a life that was lived. Sometimes people want it very, very private. Sometimes they just want to go to the beach or in their own home and have a few invited guests say a few words of their personal experience that they had with that person who is no longer with us. We support that concept. We support anything that is not traditional. That is not traditional. Our facility is set up not to be traditional. We do not have visitation rooms to have a wake. We do not have service chapels to have a service. We know that if a family wants to have that, we go back to their church. We go back to those places that had meaning, whether it was a wedding, a baptism, a celebration, during a holiday. No one goes to a funeral home to celebrate an event. Nobody does that. So that's how Legacy Option got started. And that's what we do today. We have a very small facility, but we have our own preparation room if a family wants to have that, which is a fancy word for an embalming room. We have our own refrigeration facility that is required when embalming is not requested or needed. And we have our own crematory because we felt that having our own crematory allowed us to adhere to our own policies and procedures that we set up. So the facility is very, very small. And as a result of that, our charges and fees can be much more affordable because we're not supporting a 12 or a 1,300 square foot funeral facility. We're also owned by Glenn and myself. And not everybody in Naples has money. And we are able to work with families. And by saying what that means, to translate working with families, it's a lot of times people don't have all the money at one time. So we can work with them over a period of months and whatever is comfortable for them. It has worked for us and for many of the families that we serve. We are also licensed to offer pre-need and pre-funding. And Clark mentioned that many of us like to avoid death. We also like to avoid even talking or planning about it. And oftentimes what happens is we wait until the worst possible day of our life to sit down in front of a funeral director, whether it's Glenn, myself, or any other funeral director, to discuss funeral arrangements at the worst possible time, when you're full with grief and the emotion sometimes interferes with making intellect or choices that really are affordable.